Thank you very much for meeting with me a few months ago. I am concerned about sanctuary city policies and their effect on the opioid crisis. When I was at the U.S. Attorney's Office in Denver, Denver was a hub city for heroin and cocaine and other serious drugs that were imported into the country. And from Denver, drugs were transported all the way to the Canadian line and Nebraska, Kansas, Utah. And I contacted some friends in law enforcement just recently, within the last couple of months, and they tell me that Denver is still a hub city for heroin in particular. Heroin is not grown in this country, am I correct?
That's correct.
And is it your opinion that Denver is still a hub city for the distribution of dangerous drugs like heroin?
Yes, sir.
And the importation of those drugs, like heroin, comes from other countries and then goes into Denver. And how is that transportation, how does that happen?
You're talking about the routes that go into Denver? Predominantly, I would say through vehicles, right? Trucks or smaller passenger vehicles.
Okay, so it typically comes across the southern border.
Yes, sir.
It may come in by sea, but typically comes across the southern border and is transported by human beings and vehicles to a place like Denver.
Right, when you're talking about the traditional cartels, that's correct.
And typically, those individuals that are transporting the heroin are illegal immigrants. They are illegally in this country. Is that fair to say?
I think that's a fair statement.
Okay, so a city like Denver that gives sanctuary to illegal immigrants that are involved in the drug trade is in fact aiding and abetting, and I'll let you use your words, but my words, aiding and abetting the opioid epidemic that we have in the Rocky Mountain region.
I think that where this really becomes problematic is the ability for state and locals to impact and work those types of cases. Obviously, on the federal level, we still can, but it impacts our partners in that fight. And as I just talked about before, the state and local population and how we work those cases is a critical piece.
Your former law enforcement, before you got a cushy desk job, as I might put it, you actually worked the streets, and you knew, and I'm hearing this from narcotics officers with the Denver Police Department, and I say cushy with tongue-in-cheek, please.
It doesn't feel that way most days, so.
Especially now, I would guess. But they tell me that in a typical drug transaction, you've got one person who accepts the money from the buyer, you got another person who delivers the drugs to the buyer, and you've got one or two lookouts who are making sure that they see anything suspicious with the police, they can signal the other two people. So in a drug transaction like that with four individuals, you've got two individuals that you can arrest and prosecute for the crime of distributing a dangerous drug. You've got two other people that are very difficult to prosecute unless they actually get involved in the hand-in-hand on one way or another. And so typically what would happen in that drug transaction is ICE would be called in, and the two individuals that were lookouts could be deported if they were in this country illegally, but maybe not prosecuted. In that situation, and I'll give you the remainder of my time here, but in that situation, is it important in the fight against the opioid crisis? Is it important in the fight against heroin distribution for state and local officials to be able to work with the federal government to disrupt drug organizations so that we are safer in our communities and we stop hub cities from spreading this poison throughout the region?
Absolutely. It's not really a long answer, right? I mean, our ability to work with those partners and the intelligence and evidence that they gather at the state and local level is critical to how we do our job.
And I guess my point is that it's not always prosecutable cases that disrupt organizations.
Right. The gentleman's time has expired. The gentleman from Louisiana, Mr. Richmond.